Welcome to True North Perspective. My name is Sean. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the newly implemented 50% tariffs on any imports of steel and aluminum to the United States. As we know, Donald Trump implemented them as of June the 4th, midnight. We're going to be taking a look at what experts have to say, what the economy holds for us going forward. We're going to take a look at Mark Carney's reaction, as well as the mayor of Sault Ste. Marie, Matthew Shoemaker. As we all know, that there is a huge steel plant in Sault Ste. Marie, and thousands of people depend on employment there. What really personally frustrates me, to be honest, is the fact that folks like Donald Trump, who are already billionaires, it doesn't really impact them, right? It doesn't matter to him how much steel costs or how much a car is going to cost, but it impacts. In the end, it comes down and it affects people like yourselves, me and you, consumers. We end up paying the extra prices. We end up paying the tariffs, the so-called tariffs, which are taxes, right? As you already know, Amazon is planning to show them on their receipts. It was stopped by Donald Trump, but I'm pretty sure they're going to show them again. Walmart has raised their prices. Prices have gone up everywhere. There's no doubt about that. Again, what I want to reiterate here is that folks that are billionaires like Scott Bessent, Donald Trump, they don't have to worry about this, right? Whether a meal at McDonald's costs $20 or it costs $10, to them it is no difference. But to us, it makes a big difference because we need to plan. We need to have a budget, right? We need to make sure that everything is covered for us. We have our kids to feed. We have our parents to look after. And then when there's such volatility and such uncertainty in the economy, it definitely impacts everybody. It impacts Americans, it impacts Canadians, and everybody around the world that depends on steel and aluminum in their economy. So without further ado, let's get right into the content. What we're going to take a look at first is we're going to take a look at an article that was published by Axios, and it kind of breaks down the volatility behind these tariffs. So bear with me as I pull up the article, and we're going to go over it. It is a really good article. It was published, like I said, by Axios and by Neil Irwin. And this is a beautiful chart here that shows you what the tariffs look like. So let's take a look here. 10% tariffs on China back on February the 2nd. A few weeks later, 20% China, 25% on Canada and Mexico. We go, a couple of months later, April 2nd, I believe it was a Liberation Day, so-called Liberation Day. 10% worldwide baseline tariff, 25% auto tariff. UK deal, China tariffs paused. Now remember, the UK deal, if you look at the bottom of the deal, it was not anything that is permanent or anything that is supposed to be a proper deal. Right, so it was basically something that they needed to do because a lot of citizens were losing hope, and so that UK deal, wipe it off the table. Really, it was a completely invalid deal. The courts interject and they stop the tariffs, and that's also an ongoing issue right now. So let's take a look at what Neil Irwin has to say here. And he starts off by saying it's hard to overstate how rapidly President Trump has changed the very underpinnings of U.S. trade policy since the start of February. But this chart sums it up, and it really does. I'd say take some time and take a look at Axios. Why it matters. Trump is seeking to reset America's economic relationship with the rest of the world, but he also introduced a trade policy landscape that changes the day. Tariffs with major trading partners are not only higher than in decades, they also have become far more volatile. There are two sets of economic risks from the new era of trade policy, one from the direct cost of higher import taxes, the other from the sense that policy could change minute to minute. By the numbers, the weighted average tariff, the average import tax paid on import good was 1.6% when Trump took office in 2017. For all the attention that his first-term tariffs and some Biden-era expansion of them got, that was only up to 2.4% at the start of this year. Now, swings in the average tariff rate that dwarf those changes can occur within a single news cycle, according to calculations by Yale Budget Lab, shared first with Axios. In the last month alone, the weighted average tariff has been as low as 6.9% after a trade court ruling that Trump overstepped his emergency authority, and as high as 28% just before a de-escalation from China. Between the lines, corporate supply managers are used to adapting to changing circumstances and can plug the details of any tariff regime into the calculations of where to source goods and how to price them. But the sheer unpredictability of this policy environment means it's less a one-time adjustment and more a constant moving target. What they're saying, nobody could argue that what happened has been smooth or designed in a way for the private sector to kind of gradually adapt to it. Evan Smith, chief executive of supply chain technology technology company Atlanta tells Axios. To adapt to, he said, it's less about trying to price the exact current tariff schedule into their model or their forecast, and more having to be ready for whatever the world has in store. In the meantime, he said that could mean lots of surges and shortages in the supply of goods for months to come, even if tariff policy stabilizes from here. The bottom line, many of these announcements don't last months and don't even last days. Yale's Natasha Sarin tells Axios, the uncertainty depends on where the tariffs ultimately land. Does have the uncertainty independently of where the tariffs ultimately land does have costs, and we're already seeing them in the economy. And so basically you're seeing them in price raising in cars. As I mentioned earlier in one of my videos, that Hyundai has raised their prices. Just to give you an example, with these tariffs on aluminum and steel, if you were to buy a car that was already at $40,000, and now with the 50% tariff implement, that car is now going to cost you $60,000. That $20,000 doesn't come out of the government's budget. It does not come out of Donald Trump's pockets. It does not come out of Scott Bessent's pockets. It comes out of our pockets, which means that now we need, we have to plan further. Not only that, is these type of volatile tariffs, inflations, they can come and go, but our salary will always remain the same. Right? And the problem here with most Canadians, most Americans, is your salary stays stagnant. You try and plan around your salary, and then when you have unforeseen tariffs like what we're seeing now, it really just messes up your budget, and you end up being short in your most necessary expenses. Having said that, let's take a look at a professional who just brought out a video on X, and he talks about these tariffs and the impact. Let's take a quick look here, and we'll go from there. So this is, again, Ed Cranstein had made this post here, and Professor Justin Wolfers explains how stupid and harmful Trump's 50% steel tariffs are for Americans. Here are the industries that rely on steel the most. And we have construction, automotive, heavy machinery and farm equipment, shovels, bulldozers, forklifts, mining, energy and pipelines, consumer appliances, food and beverage, shipping, shipbuilding, and railway. Food and beverage. Now, the question is, how is Donald Trump going to afford his Diet Coke? Like I said, it doesn't really matter to him, right? But it matters to us because every penny counts. Yes, the tariffs will help approximately 5,000 people who work in the steel industry in Pittsburgh, but they will decimate everyone else. So let's look at the reaction here. It's a very quick video, 42 seconds, and then I'll see you on the other side.
Now is the magnitudes. It turns out there's only about 5,000 people who work in steel in Pittsburgh. Depending how you count it, you could say there's several 100,000 who work in Detroit in the sort of manufacturing industries that use metals. And so immediately now you see the problem, which is this helps a small sliver of the economy, the folks in hard hats in Pittsburgh. But all of a sudden, when Ford goes to buy more steel, even if it's buying American steel, its steel manufacturer will say, well, guess what? If you don't buy from us, you have to buy elsewhere. It's 50% more expensive elsewhere. So we're going to jack up our prices by 50%. And so all of the manufacturing firms in Detroit are going to face these much higher costs now as the magnitudes. It turns out there's only about 5,000 people who work in steel in Pittsburgh. Depending how you count it, you could say there's several 100,000 who work in Detroit in the sort of manufacturing industries that use metals. And so immediately now you see the problem, which is this helps a small sliver of the economy, the folks in hard hats in Pittsburgh. But all of a sudden, when Ford goes to buy more steel, even if it's buying American steel, its steel manufacturer will say, well, guess what? If you don't buy from us, you have to buy elsewhere. It's 50% more expensive elsewhere. So we're going to jack up our prices by 50%. And so all of the manufacturing firms in Detroit are going to face these much higher costs now as the magnitudes. It turns out there's only about 5,000 people who work in steel.
So you can see here that there's a lot of, little issues that come with raising tariffs here. So now, the steel, factories in the U.S. have a bit of an advantage because they could easily say, hey, if you go and buy somewhere else, it's 50% more, and they can also raise the price, which is a fact. It's nothing to hide. It's nothing that you can't see. It's very clear that how the market can be manipulated. So again, it's 5,000 people that work in Pittsburgh, but then you have a population of 340 million minus the 5,000, and Canada's 40 million, also a population that are going to take a big hit in terms of this. Mind you, the cost of housing will go up, the cost of automotives will go up, renovations will go up. A lot of people during the summertime renovate their homes, right? That's a fact. That's a given. They take out loans. They will renovate their basements, their driveways. All of that will be impacted, which could mean that people might change their mind and say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to renovate, and now it affects employment. So it's a chain reaction. Let's switch gears here and take a look at what Carney had to say, Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada. And then we're going to end with a video from Matthew Shoemaker, who is the mayor of Sault Ste. Marie. So let's quickly get onto that, and we'll take a look at what he had to say. There's an article and a quick video, and you will see for yourselves as well. All right, so this article here was actually published by CBC and written by Catherine Tunney, and it's only a 4-minute read. I'm just going to read you a bit of it, and then we're going to take a quick look at the video. And so Prime Minister Mark Carney says his government is readying further retaliation measures if negotiations with the United States to end the recently doubled tariffs on steel and aluminum fail. We are in intensive negotiations with the Americans and in parallel preparing reprisals if those negotiations do not succeed. He told the House of Commons during questioning period Wednesday afternoon. The government is under mounting pressure to show strength after U.S. President Donald Trump's latest economy wallop, which is forecasted to devastate Canada's steel and aluminum industries. Carney called the move to double levies on steel and aluminum imports, bringing them to 50% illogical and unjustified. I completely agree with that. It does not make sense. Speaking to reporters at Queen's Park earlier in the day, Ontario Premier Doug Ford says he would be all over the federal government to slap another 25% on their steel. We can't sit back and let President Trump steamroll us, said the outspoken Premier. Every single day that goes by gives uncertainty through the sectors. It adds additional costs on steel, so we need to react immediately. Carney said the government is focused on ongoing intensive discussions with the United States. We will take some time, some time, because we are in intensive discussions right now from the Americans on the trade relationship, Carney said ahead of a caucus meeting Wednesday morning. And the last video I'm going to show you right now is what Sault Ste. Marie's Mayor Matthew Shoemaker had to say. The scare there is that we have about 2,000 to 3,000 people whose jobs might be impacted. Algoma Steel is another big factor as well too. So let's take a look at that, and then we will wrap everything up on the other side of the video. And there's the video, and here we go.
50% after President Donald Trump followed through on his plans to double the duties.
The president will be signing that executive order today, and steel and aluminum tariffs will be going to 50%, yes.
Meantime, the mayor of Sault Ste. Marie says that Trump doubling the steel and aluminum tariffs creates a severe economic depression in his city. So for more on those concerns, we're joined by Sault Ste. Marie's Mayor, Matthew Shoemaker. Mayor, thank you so much for being with us. Your reaction this morning and your key concerns as we are now faced with 50% tariffs.
Yeah, I mean, the reaction is there's lots of anger and lots of anxiety in Sault Ste. Marie right now. Anger directed towards the U.S. administration, anxiety over what's going to happen if this is a long-term impact on our steel mill. So I've been saying that the federal government needs to, the federal and provincial governments, frankly, need to come together with a plan to assist the mills in Sault Ste. Marie, Hamilton, Saskatchewan during this time, all the while trying to negotiate an end to the tariff regime that the U.S. has imposed on us, because that it is unsustainable. It makes the product uneconomic to sell at a 50% increase in cost.
Okay, then describe for the rest of the country, what does that do to your community?
Well, half of our community relies on the steel plant, either directly or indirectly. It's about 2,800 jobs directly, but it impacts grocery stores, so restaurants, the theater, the home improvement stores. Every one of those industries, secondary industries, and the suppliers, of course, to Algoma that go in there and do contract work. Every one of those businesses is going to be feeling the pinch of less money in Algoma's pocket to spend on, their employees, to spend on their contractors, to spend on product development. So that is going to be an immediate impact. I mean, they were able to, hobble along, I would say, with the 25% tariff while the negotiations were ongoing to resolve them. But at 50%, it's going to mean, it's going to have to mean job impacts.
Well, and I was going to ask you about the speed of that, because as you described it, hobbling along at 25% tariffs, you double that to 50. How long can you sustain those jobs? How long can any company sustain that kind of a tariff increase?
I mean, Algoma will know the answer with certainty. They're going through, as I understand, a number of scenarios to determine what path they will have to go down. A lot of it depends on what the supports are going to be from the federal government. So they've announced that defense spending will be made with Canadian steel. The Canadian projects will be made with Canadian steel. But if it takes 6 months to get there, there might not be Canadian steel being produced because it's unproducible at a 50% cost increase. So, I'm saying that there needs to be an immediate stopgap. I'm saying within the next 7 to 14 days to help the plant get to a point where they can finally negotiate a resolution to the tariffs.
Well, you bring up a really good point that this is in direct conflict with what the federal government has laid out as these nation-building projects. Can't build a nation when you've got difficult to build a nation when you've got 50% tariffs. Listen, a statement from the Prime Minister's office late yesterday calls these tariffs add-ons unlawful and unjustified. But it's adding it's working on a new economic partnership with the United States. So on Monday, you asked the federal government to launch an action plan to support the steel industry within 7 to 10 days. Does that plan still apply?
I think it does, because negotiating a resolution to this with the U.S. is not going to happen within the next couple of weeks, but there is the prospect of job losses within the next couple of weeks. So as I've been saying, it's harder to rebuild a steel plant or to recreate a manufacturing industry than it is to support the one you've got so that it can make it through the hard times. And you can just look at exactly what President Trump's trying to do right now. He's trying to bring back steel jobs in the Pittsburgh area that have been gone for a long time, and he's doing it in this way that is having a ridiculous.
Here. I want you guys to pay attention to exactly what Mayor Matthew Shoemaker is saying. He's saying that what Trump is doing right now is he's trying to bring back manufacturing to Pittsburgh. And this all had happened because, the prices got cheaper and, manufacturing went down. And he's trying to avoid that problem. He's trying to bring it back now. And what Shoemaker is saying is that we don't want to run into the same problem. And this 50% tariff is going to make that happen, where we're going to have to stop producing steel because it's going to be very expensive. So basically what Donald Trump is doing is he's putting us back in the same position that he was, right? Back in 2017 and 2018. But let's continue on. But that's a very, very good point. I think it's a smart point to make. We don't want to be in that position. We want to be secure. We want Canada to have a good economy, and we want to be able to manufacture steel. And we want to make sure that everybody has jobs and that, it is sustainable. So let's continue on with the video. Sorry.
Algoma and support Dofasco and Stelco while you've got them here, so that they can make it through to the end of the line where tariffs are removed or negotiated to be removed.
We are day one of this 50% tariff. What do you need to hear from the government today?
that there is a concrete plan within the next 7 to 10, 14 days to resolve, to not resolve this, but to create supports that will be in effect immediately. So either they're going to buy more steel for defense spending contracts in the very short term, or they're going to support the workers who are impacted by the job losses, or they're going to stockpile steel, for example, would be another way that they could do it. So there's any number of ways they could go about it, but it needs to be quick and it needs to be impactful.
Last question, and this is about the people in your community. I know they are the casualties of this governmental trade war. What kind of concerns are you hearing from citizens? I mean, these are people who are standing to lose their jobs in the next month or so.
This is also
the concern is that there is uncertainty around it all, and the uncertainty stems from the fact that nobody knows what's going to come out of the American administration next. So that's why I believe, and I think that the elected representatives at the provincial and federal government would say there needs to be immediate supports so that consumers and workers at the plant can have confidence that their job will still exist 6 months or a year from now, and not this uncertainty of how long is this going to go on and how many job losses will there be. There needs to be something in place quickly to provide that comfort.
Imagine you didn't get a lot of sleep last night. Sault Ste. Marie Mayor Matthew Shoemaker, thanks so much for...
So you can see that there's turmoil in Canada, in the U.S. It's affecting everybody in the world. It's affecting many other countries. This is just not fair, right? This is just not fair. These tariffs are not doing anything to help the economy. And let's be very clear about this as well too. Donald Trump's idea is that the tariffs are going to help the trade deficit. It does not work like that. It will not help the GDP. Neither is it going to help the deficit, right? He needs to understand how trade deficit works and how GDP works, right? Gross domestic product. Also, you guys should know that as of the last report, Canada is actually, or U.S. is actually in a surplus with Canada right now. Canada has about $2.2 billion more than United States. So you can see that Canada is not causing any issues. We are, good partners. We are allies. We are, the United States' biggest trading partners. I implore American citizens, my friends, to speak up. The Congress to actually put these tariffs down, to stand up and do something, because it is in your power. The tariffs should be implemented according to what Congress wants. They have the pocket. They have the power of the purse, right? Donald Trump cannot trample over the Constitution, and neither can he, usurp the power of Congress. He needs to abide by the law. These tariffs are affecting everybody. They're going to drive even more poverty, more inflation. U.S.'s economy is already contracted. Right? It's only going to get worse. A lot of experts are saying that, they're looking at inflation. Inflation is rising. Sometimes I question myself and I ask, where does Donald Trump get all these numbers from? Because they're not true. You can look at the right wing, you can look at the left wing, you can look at the centrist. The numbers are pretty much equal among all of them. They'll tell you that the economy is not looking good. People are, we're looming for job losses. We're looming for, people foreclosing on their homes prices going up, automobiles going up. And the most important part, I should say, is that partnership that Canada had with the United States is now also dwindling. And we'll get into that a little bit later in another video. But if you found the content useful and you enjoyed my style, I'm still a little bit new. I'm trying to, get my words straight. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Do leave a comment. I don't see a lot of comments. Please leave a comment and tell me what you'd like me to talk about, what improvements you'd like to see. Would you like the videos longer, more content, shorter? And don't forget that 50% of any revenue that is collected from X, from Facebook, or from YouTube will go straight towards people in need and charities. So do your part, like, share, subscribe, and I'm going to see you guys in the next video.